Hey guys, today we're on Module 12, Lesson 2 on page 303. The title of our lesson is Represent Hundredths as Fractions and Decimals. We're going to be able to use a visual model and decimal notation to represent fractions, mixed numbers, and decimal and hundredths. So yesterday's lesson, y'all did tenths. And with that, I would have used some change like dimes, and then you could count tenths, because when we think of tenths and hundredths, we know that that's fractions that are less than 1. So I want you to notice in hundredths we have THS, tenths, TNTHS. To me, I think of this as change, so I think of dimes. So if I was going to write tenths, I would think of like 60, 6 tenths. So that would be like 60, and that would be 6 tenths. Today we're going to work on hundredths. So that would think of if you just get a whole bunch of change and count it all out, you would be counting hundredths. So today's problem is potassium is an important nutrient for your body. Clear this. Potassium is an important nutrient for our bodies. It supports muscle strength, fluid balance, and energy levels, among other things. So you're getting a science lesson. So potassium is in bananas. There's a lot of potassium in bananas. So the amount of potassium in a medium-sized banana is between 4/10 grams and 5/10. So this is showing us tenths, TENTHS. And on the number line, we're going to look at tenths. So what could be the number of grams of potassium in a medium banana? So it's between 4/10 and 5/10. I want you to think of, when we do tenths and hundredths, as change. So think of between 4 dimes and between 5 dimes. So what could fall between 4 dimes and 5 dimes? Between 40 and 50. So look at our number line. We see it only goes to 1, so this is a fraction part. So this would be like 0.1. This would be 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. So it's going to fall between that and 0.5. And we could keep going 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9. So we're trying to go between 4/10 and 5/10. All right, so I want to place a number. Let's just place it right in the middle. It's a small number line, I'll place it in the middle. So if it's between 0.4, 0.5, we would get 0.4. What number comes in the middle of a number line? If it's halfway through, it would be 5. So 0.45 would be this dot right here. And we would write that as 45 hundredths. So 45 hundredths. So when you think of hundredths, think of the hundreds place value block, the little flat that has all the hundreds on it. So 10 going down, 10 going across. And I'm going to show you that on the next page. So the number that we could pick, they didn't give us the number. The number we could pick between 4/10 and 5/10 would be 45 hundredths. So we would say hundredths. REDTHS. Okay, and when we write a fraction, this little, I'll show you on the next page. So go ahead and turn the page. It'll make more sense when you see the hundreds chart. All right, here we go. So here we have our hundreds chart, and y'all are familiar with this and shading this in. So what I was about to say was, when you do this line right here, so this fraction bar, this line means out of. So when we have a jar containing 6,500 liters of fresh squeezed oranges, we have 65 out of 100 will be shaded. 65 out of 100 will be shaded. So represent the amount of juice on the hundreds chart. So we're going to count out 65. So that is 6/10 and 500. So that's 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10. So over half of 100, and then we're going to count out 5 hundredths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 65 out of 100 that we shaded in. And then on the number line, we have, it goes up to 1. So these are all, think of it as $1. And these would all be 10 cents, 20 cents, 30 cents, 40 cents, 50 cents, 60 cents, 70 cents, 80 cents, 90 cents. So I'll write it like this. So it's 0.10, 0.20, 0.30, 0.40, 40, 50, 0.60, 0.70, 0.80, 0.90. So if we have 65, we're going to fall between the 60 and the 70. So that would count over 5 ones, 5 hundredths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it would be right here, and we would have, clean this up right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it would be 0.65, 65 hundredths. Okay? At the bottom, it has the definition for hundredths. And remember, I said I like to think of change. So if you have some spare change laying around the house, this is a good time to count out your hundredths and practice writing your decimals. So a hundredth is one of 100 equal-sized parts. In a decimal, the first digit to the right of the decimal, so here's your decimal, the first digit to the right is the tenths place. The second digit to the right of the hundredths is, the second digit to the right of the decimal is the hundredths place. Okay, so the first digit to the right is the tenths place, the second digit to the right is the hundredths place. We know if it's on the right-hand side of the decimal, it is not a whole number, it is a fraction. Okay, so let's look at it. A, how would you describe the tick marks on the number line between the tenths? So they're talking about these tick marks right here. How would we describe these? Well, those tick marks, they divide the space equally. So there's 10 tick marks between each line. There's 10 lines and there's 10 tick marks between those lines. So the marks divide the space between the tenths into 10 equal-sized pieces that represent hundreds. It divides the number into 10 equal-sized pieces. PCS for pieces, to represent hundredths. Hundredths. Hundredths is very important because hundredths means it's a fraction. B, between which tenths did you locate the number on the number line? Well, between the 6 tenths and 7 tenths. Between 6 and 7 tenths. Between 6 and 7 tenths. Alright, so let's look at our place value chart. How many tenths and how many hundredths represent 65 hundredths? Well, we have 6 tenths and 5 hundredths. So record the decimal form of 65 hundredths on the number line. So we would write 0, we do not have a whole number, so we put a 0, and we have 6 tenths and 5 hundredths. Another way to look at it is if we had 65 cents, we would have 6 dimes and 5 pennies, because 6 dimes represents tenths, because 1 dime equals 10. And then a penny is 1 out of 100, because if you had 100 pennies, you would have $1. So think of it as 6 dimes and 5 pennies. If you'll turn the page. And we're going to do the top section together, and then you can do the bottom section. So the hundredths model represents the length in meters of a watermelon vine. How can you describe the length of the watermelon using words? Well, first I want to look at this chart. So it's shaded in green, it's a little hard to see. But if we have 1 whole hundred shaded in, we have 1. So that represents 1. There's another one, that's 2, and that's 3. That's 1 whole, 2 whole, and 3 wholes. Then we have this 100 chart that has 4 shaded in. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Think of that as like pennies. If you have 4 out of 100, it's like 4 pennies. So when you write the decimal, we're going to have a 0 in the tens place. We do not have a whole tenth. Okay? So how can you describe the length of the watermelon vine using words? So we have 3, using words. We have 3 and 4 hundredths. That 3 right here is a whole number. Okay, so we're actually going to have a mixed number fraction. A mixed number means we have a whole number plus a fraction. So how can you write the length of the vine as a mixed number and a decimal? Well, 1, 2, 3, so that's going to give us 3. And then this is a hundreds chart. So we want to do it out of 100. We do not have a whole tenth, we only have 4, so it's going to be 3 and 4 hundredths. When you write this as a decimal, it gets a little bit tricky because we know that we have 3 ones. Do we have any tens? Is there a number for tens? No, there's not a full tenth, so we put a 0, and then we have 4 hundredths. So when we write the fraction, it's 3 and 4 hundredths, the decimal's 3 and 4 hundredths. I want you to do 1 and 2 at the bottom of the page. Pause your video, do 1 and 2, and then start the video back to check yourself. Alright, so at the bottom of the page, number 1, a grapefruit has a mass of 2,300 kilograms. Represent the mass on the hundredths model. Write the mass as a decimal. So 2,300 hundredths is not a whole number, but we have 2 tens and 3 hundredths, so we would shade in 2 rows. That's 10, 20, and then 1, 2, 3 hundredths. So that would represent 2,300 hundredths on the model, and then we would write it. We do not have a whole number, so we're at 0. Our decimal, we have 2 tenths shaded in, so 2 tenths and 3 hundredths. Number 2 represents 73 hundredths as a fraction and as a decimal on the number line. So we would count over. This is 1 tenth, 2 tenths, 3 tenths, 4 tenths, 5 tenths, 6 tenths, 7. So this would be 0.70. We're looking for the third tick mark after that. 1, 2, 3. So right here. So we would write 0.73 or 73 hundredths. Remember, this line means out of. So 73 out of 100. That's it.